As you know, okay, Kiddush. So what we're doing this year basically is a week of Kaddish and a week of Parsha. A Sichos class shouldn't take 2 hours, but we manage to do that. Kaddish shouldn't take 2 hours either, but we manage. So today's Sicha, the Sichos are being prepared as we speak. So hopefully by the time I'm ready with my introduction, we'll actually be able to go into the Sicha. We've been doing a syllabus, which I like. And actually, I met a 14-year-old boy, 14-year-old kid. He says, Rabbi Paltiel, I listen to your classes. I say, which classes do you listen to? You have a bunch of classes on the story of the Chumash, and I'm following. I was like, really, wow. In other words, the classes we give here, there's some kid who's going with us on this journey. It's very special. And he's choosing it. No one's making him do it, which is really wonderful. So we're on this journey, and the journey was originally called the Avos, the patriarchs. Then it was called Yossi and his brothers. Now it's called From Exile to Redemption. It's basically the story of the Chumash. And I don't want to use the word we've been bogged down, but we have been bogged down by the 10 Makkos. We had a class almost on each one of the 10 Makkos. I mean, you were not here last year and the year before. We had a separate class in each one of the plagues and the spirit behind the plagues. The last couple of discussions have been about the death of the firstborn, and the fact that it happens at midnight, and the idea that in one point, two opposite events transpire, something bad and something good. Remember the last class we had, was the Rebbe made the argument that the good is done with direct intent, and the bad is sort of allowed to happen. A very interesting philosophical insight, which the Rebbe extracts from the biblical text, from the Psukim. What's today's class about? It's about Korban Pesach, actually. The Paschal offering, Korban Pesach. And we're at the threshold. We're about to cross from Egypt into the desert. And of course, going from Egypt into the desert is going to be a journey. There'll be a bunch of sichos that are going to analyze the significance of that trip. I guess one of the things which is good to say at this point is that, there's the old cliche, and it's not a cliche, it's really life, that says it's very easy to take a Jew out of Egypt. It's quite another story to take Egypt out of the Jew. Right? And this is true not just of Jews, it's true of all of mankind. Right? Freeing slaves, I thank you very much. Yeah. Freeing slaves is a job. Giving slaves freedom is a virtual impossibility. And you understand why, because a slave is not just a physical condition. It's a mental condition. It's a psychological condition. If you're a slave for a week and you're free, so you're not a slave anymore. But if you're a slave for months and years and decades and generations, you don't just end slavery because the master died. That's not the way it works. You can even read the accounts of the Nazis disappearing from the death camps in the last days, in the end of April, beginning of May. And in some places it happened as early as February, depending on where the camps were situated, in Germany or in Poland or in Russia. And the Jewish people who are left behind don't know what to do. They just don't know what to do, and you have to have liberators. In other words, the camp was gone, the Nazis disappeared, and then people have to come and free them. It's a separate event. Now, of course, freeing the Jews from the death camp was not a simple matter at all, and I don't want to get all caught up in this. It's still going on. We're still freeing ourselves from the death camp. I have a friend who's much younger than I am who says to me, I'm a survivor of the Holocaust. And he really, really is. He really is. His father is seriously messed up. And he did a wonderful job at messing up his children. I mean, really, really terrible. He says, I'm a survivor of the Holocaust. And it's true. He is a survivor of the Holocaust. It goes on. But anyway, so becoming technically free is not the same thing as becoming legitimately free. Because, of course, technically free means that nobody owns me. Legitimately free means I own me. And there's a lot of space between nobody owns me and I own myself. Because owning yourself is a responsibility. Owning oneself is choices. Owning oneself is taking that responsibility and exercising those choices and so on. So, of course, the story of the Exodus, the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim, is not only about taking the Jew out of Egypt. It is very, very much about taking Egypt out of the Jew. It's very much about taking Egypt out of the Jew. And that's why it's such a long story. That's why it's in the Chumash, and that's why it's Shmois and Va'era, and boy, it's a story that goes on for pages and pages and details, because all of these details are not about technically liberating the Jewish people from their slavery. It's about giving them freedom. Giving them freedom. And of course, one of the most basic aspects of that freedom is a basic Jewish belief, which is really, really, honestly, common sense, even though it's not intuitively so. In other words, you would never say this. But if you'll think about it seriously and honestly, you'll appreciate that this is the case. The Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos, Ein lecha ben chayden ela mi she'esek b'talmud Torah. There's nobody free unless one is engaged in learning of Torah. In other words, we're not free because we have no master. We're free because God is our master. If freedom means I can do whatever I want and I have no master, freedom is another form of slavery. I mentioned this to you, and I was shocked when I saw it, that a group, an organization that was coming to the Rebbe in the late 80s, early 90s, when there was a real exodus of Russian Jews, 500,000 Russians. I don't know how many of them were Jewish, but tons of people left Russia at that time. And there was discussion about them moving to Israel or moving to the United States. The Rebbe felt very strongly that you can't force. The Rebbe publicly once spoke about not forcing Russians to go to Israel. Let them choose where they want to go. But at the same time, the Rebbe said you should convince them to go to Israel. Don't force them, but convince them. And these were the Rebbe's words. If they don't move to Israel, they're moving from one Galus to another Galus. If they move to Israel, they're moving from Galus to Cheres. If they move from Russia to America, they're going from one exile to another exile. If they move from Russia to the Eretz Yisrael, they're going from exile to freedom. And the Rebbe didn't mean it in the political sense. He meant it in the religious sense. A free person is empowered. A free person that I can do whatever I want, I can indulge in any animalism I choose, is being empowered. And therefore the Mishnah says, we're not free in not having a master, we're free in having a master. We're free in the fact that God is our master. And this deserves a conversation. This deserves a conversation. The idea that you're only free if you accept Hashem as your master deserves a conversation, because it's so un-Western. It's so un-American,
Paradox.
It sounds like a paradox. It's not a paradox. It's a truism. I want to tell you something. I grew up in the house of an immigrant. My father's Russian. My father was born in Moscow. My father came to this country when he was around 15 years old. My father is a very interesting person, a most interesting human being, and unfortunately not very well understood. He's one of those people who's so deep and so smart that he's people don't get him. Mamish. He's mamish. But I'm his son, and I get him a little bit. And one of the many things that my father gave me as an education was we would walk to shul. This didn't happen once, this happened 50 times. And he would talk about America. My father's love for America, I love America. I really love America. There's no Obama in me at all. And I don't mean Obama because he's African American, I mean Obama because he hates America. Or he wants a different America. It's not nice he hates America. He's the president of the United States. But my father loves America. He really loves America. And he has an understanding of America. An understanding of America that comes from his reading and from his education. He's a very smart man. When I was a kid, I didn't know what he was talking about. I thought he was, like everything else my father says, beating a kettle, just talking nonsense. But as I got older and smarter and humbler, I started to understand what he was talking about. And he would talk about freedom. My father gave me 1,000 lectures on freedom. Now, when you're a little kid, and even when you're a big kid, what does freedom mean? Freedom means I can do whatever I want. I can eat any pizza I want. I can buy any chip I want. I can do any sin I want. My father was talking about a very different concept of freedom, but when I was 9, when I heard these lectures, I wasn't intuitive enough to appreciate the depth of it all. And one of the things which really resonates, my father talked a lot about freedom. Americans are the freest people in the world. He would say this again and again and again. I didn't understand what he's talking about. Americans are the freest people. And he would say Europeans are not free, Australians are not free, and they're Western countries, the democratic countries. Americans are the freest people in the world. And he would make his case, make his argument. I know that a lot of you would say, what's the difference in America and a Frenchman or a Brit? Besides that we have different economic systems, and you can argue that our economic system is based more on freedom, but it also, there's haves and have-nots and so on and so forth. When he would try to explain to me what he means that America has a freedom, his model, his example was Benjamin Franklin. My father loves Benjamin Franklin.
Reading his biography now.
What is it about Benjamin Franklin so amazing? He was such a character. He was a mamish. He was a real crazy guy. He was an incredible personality, Benjamin Franklin was. Benjamin Franklin is the father of America, more than George Washington. He really is the father of America. The neshama of America is more Benjamin Franklin than anybody. He was our ambassador to France, and he did incredible things, but he never really held public office. But his personality is imprinted on the American psyche. My father said Benjamin Franklin was one of the greatest inventors of all time. And he gave stuff away. He invented the lightning rod. How much money has been saved? He invented the lightning rod. When did he invent it? In the 1750s, the 1760s, way before America became a country. Way before. And he gave it away. He didn't charge. Imagine he would patent that. You know how much money that's worth? Do you know how many, it's not billions, trillions of dollars has been spared, and how much heartbreak has been spared by inventing a simple tool? He figured out what electricity was way before Faraday, and he understood that electricity travels in the nearest path, and he was able to redirect an electrical current from a lightning. Instead of hitting a house that's made of wood, it'll hit a wire, it'll go into the ground, it'll be grounded and finished. He gave it away for free. And my father would say to me, my father doesn't have a lot of words. If I was saying it to my son, I would say, why do you think you gave it away for free? And then my father would say, you know why? Free people can afford to give things away. Wow. That was the message that he gave me. As a kid, I'm not eulogizing my father, should live and be well, but this is wisdom. This kind of wisdom you don't get in school. I had the good fortune to have such a father. Only free people give things away. And then he would compare America to other countries. And he would show me over and over again, Americans are good. We really are good. We're sugar and sometimes stupid, but we're good. And part of that goodness is when you're free, you can afford to give. You don't mind, almost being taken advantage of. And he would give me argument that look at America in the last 2.5 centuries. Look at what we've done. I don't want to start politics, because politics today is very, very, very personal and very, very, very angry. But there's so much truth to this, that when you're a free person, you're generous. Now it's weird. Why? Because you would think that when you give something, you have to have a reason to give. Why would I give you something? Because I want something back. If I don't need anything from you, why should I give you anything? And my father was trying to teach me it's exactly the other way around. It's the person who doesn't expect anything back, who doesn't need you, that's able to give. This is part of my education. I grew up in a Hasidic house, a very Hasidic house, but my father taught this to me. Very repetitive. He would say that I didn't know what he was talking about. I'm 54 years old. I heard this 40 years ago, 45 years ago. And now it's starting to make sense to me. It's very profound, because freedom means courage, right? Why is a person afraid to give something away, right? Think about your own children. Quote, you don't want your children taken advantage of, end quote. It takes a certain kind of person to say, my kids are being taken advantage of, is being taught goodness. That comes not from weakness. A weak person can't do that. Only a strong person can do that. And that's what it means to be free. That's what it means to be free. And my father would say there was never in the history of the world a nation like America. This is what he was teaching me. And as nuts as we are, and as cracked up as we are, it's really, really true. We're unbelievably generous. The amount of tzedakah America gives to the whole world is nuts. And even the people who are on the conservative right, who want to put America first, after you cut back all the kindness that America does to the world, it's still more than any country ever gave. And my father says it's rooted in freedom. He really believes that Benjamin Franklin left his mark on this country. He made over 200 inventions, you know that? And he gave stuff away, just gave stuff away. Benjamin Franklin left endowments. I had a student here many, many years ago from Pennsylvania, from Philadelphia. And she said to us, probably 20 years ago, that there were endowments that Benjamin Franklin had left in the United States of America that had just matured. He put money down and says, in 200 years from today, it'll become a resource to help people. He was so forward. And he gave stuff. He just gave. He put aside money and said, 50 years from today, take this money and use it to help people. In 100 years from today. Why? To do that, you have to be free. You don't give stuff away because you're a prisoner. You give stuff away because you're free. Because it comes from power, it comes from strength, it comes from courage. And of course, the word that's in between those two is the word responsibility. Empowerment, responsibility. Anyway, this is the end of my American speech, okay? I push it in the last few days. I don't know why. I've been thinking about this a lot. I've been playing this movie, man. I could see myself walking on President Street between Troy and Albany. And my father's talking about Americans being free. And I'm trying to figure out how not to insult him because he's totally nonsensical. And now it's all these years later, and I'm literally reliving those conversations. And I'm appreciating them. And that's the meaning of this Mishnah. A Jew isn't free because he has no master. A Jew isn't free because he's a servant of God. Now, how is service freedom? Service is freedom because, first of all, service is chosen, not imposed. And second of all, service makes you better. It's really, really true. A person who works the least is the most pathetic. A person who works the most is the most blessed and the most successful. It really is the way of the world. It's really, really true. People who are hardworking are free. And of course, when you're working for God, if I'm working for whoever it is, if I'm working for a fellow human being, so there's a conflict of egos. I have an ego, he has an ego, he's not perfect, I'm not perfect. So there's friction involved. But when you work for Hashem, even if Hashem gives you an incredible workload, He makes you work very, very, very hard. And He pushes you. Because you trust that He doesn't have an ulterior motive. He's not taking advantage of you. He's not using you. He's not enslaving you. What He's doing is good for you. In that work, you are free. The harder you work, the freer you are. This is really emes. Now, the truth of the matter is it's true no matter what. But if you live in Stalinist Russia, the harder you work, the bigger a fool you are. Why? Because nobody cares about you. You're a cog. You're a spoke in a wheel. But when you live in a free society, when you work hard and when you give back, that's your blessing. That's your freedom. That's your goodness. That's your life. And that's what the Chazal are saying. We're not free because we have no master. We are free because we have a master. But our master is God. You understand? When you have a human master who suppresses you and he crushes you and you live for him, that's slavery. But when you have a master who works you very, very hard, but in the work that the master is giving you, you are you, not him. That work is freedom. I was reading this morning a book, and by the way, I want to advertise this. This is an English-speaking crowd. There's a book that came out literally 2 weeks ago for the Kinnas HaShluchim called Shadar, S-H-A-D-A-R. It's a book about Rabbi from Los Angeles. I don't know if you know who that is. But he's one of the greatest chassidim of our time. One of the greatest chassidim of our time. It's an English book. I would encourage you to buy it and read it. I'm loving it. I didn't sleep well last night, and I read a lot of pages of this book. So one of the stories that I read was Rabbi Reichik married a girl named Rappaport, Leah Rappaport. Before the war, her parents were incredibly rich, very, very, very rich, exceedingly wealthy. After the war, there was nothing left. Nothing. She lost so many family members, it's sick. Sick. In one place alone, they killed 50 Rappaports. She survived with her mother and 3 sisters, and then one of the sisters died after the war, and then she had 2 sisters in her. So here was this girl who grew up in the lap of luxury, but she grew up in a very chassidish house. Before the war, there were homes that were very rich and very chassidish. Emes a chassidish house. She had brothers who were go'oinim adinim, great masters of Torah. She was an 18-year-old girl when she got married. She was a child during the war. Anyway, she married Rabbi Reichik. Rabbi Reichik never had 2 nickels to rub together. They were I'm not going to call them very poor, but they were certainly broke. And they lived in Los Angeles. In 1949, they moved to Los Angeles. 1949 moving to Los Angeles is, I don't know what to compare it to. It's like going on shlichus to the Philippines. It's so far away, not only geographically, but the percentage of frum Jews living in LA at the time. There was no school. There was barely kosher. And Rabbi Isaac showed up in LA, and there were many frum people. He befriended everybody, frum and not frum. He was all of 30. In other words, the guys he was befriending were not younger than him, they were his age. Also survivors, but they didn't see him as an equal. They saw him as their father. These were all survivors. I was reading Beryl Weiss and Moshe Weiss. Rabbi Reichik they all lost their families in the war. They all came alone to the West. They found women, their husbands, and they got married and they built lives. Rabbi Reichik was every one of their fathers. And they look back at it in hindsight, he was only 30. We treated him like a 50, 60-year-old wise man. He wasn't 50. He was very wise, but he was very young. He was their age. Anyway, they moved to LA, and it was very far away. She survived with her mother and 2 sisters. One of her sisters was living in Israel. Another one of her sisters ended up living in England, but her mother lived in New York. And she wanted to be with her mother. Could you imagine what this kid lost? I remember her. She was a happy lady. She was not a miserable, bitter lady at all. And she had so much to be bitter about. Oh, they all had so much to be bitter about. Anyway, I was in her home. She fed the whole, anybody wanted. Her house was like a soup kitchen, a public kitchen. They moved to Los Angeles in 1949. And the 2 of them, he was 30, and I think she was 18. He was 28, and she was 18. They were very young. She was much younger than him. And they started to do the Rebbe's work. But part of his job he traveled a lot. He was gone from the home many months out of the year. And she was home alone, this little girl, who was not used to working very hard, was suddenly thrust into this life. And she did it with such joy and such success and such blessing. I mean, there's so many people in this world who owe their life, let alone their Yiddishkeit, to the Reichiks. It's not normal. Incredibly successful. Shluchim. So here's a story which will drive you nuts. I read it 3:30 this morning when I couldn't sleep. The previous Rebbe sent them on shlichus. Now you have to remember, this kid had no father, and no mother, had no brother, had no sister. So he lands in America, and all he had was the yeshiva. The yeshiva was his father, the yeshiva was his mother, the yeshiva was his uncle, the yeshiva was his aunt, the yeshiva was his brother, the yeshiva was his sister. He had nothing. And the Rebbe immediately, the previous Rebbe, sent him on trips all over the place. So he would come to yeshiva, he'd spend like 3 days, and then he'd go off on a trip to visit 6 or 7 cities, which take 2 or 3 weeks. He'd come back to New York. He'd lost his bedroom, so he'd move into a different dormitory room. He had like 100 roommates because he was never there. He'd stay in yeshiva for 4 or 5 days. He'd go back to the schedule, learn daven, and then boom, another trip. This is how he lived. Anyway, when it was time for dating, he would consult the Frierdiker Rebbe, and the Frierdiker Rebbe treated all these kids like you treat your own children. He mamish coddled them. He didn't stand on the top of the mountain and give instructions. He fathered them. I have a mechutin, a fortunate mechutin, named Rabbi Weinberg, Levi Weinberg. His father's Yossi Weinberg, who was also from these kids. And he wrote the Frierdiker Rebbe a letter in 1943 or 44 when he was courting his wife. It's one of the most extraordinary stories. He courted his wife to marry her, and at the same time was makadover to Yiddishkeit. And they had a Chassidish house. Can you imagine how special you have to be? How special you have to be. She was from. Her father was from. Her father was a widower. But they were not, Chassidish. They were in Canada in the 1930s and 40s. And while they were Chassan Kala, he was teaching her how you made a Chassidish house. And she went along. It's extraordinary. So he wrote to the Frierdiker Rebbe that, I have no father, I have no mother. So I need you to be my father and my mother. And he was. He answered the stupidest, silliest questions. He would share with the Frierdiker Rebbe the kinds of things that you'd be embarrassed to share with your rabbi, let alone with your Rebbe. He had no one else to talk to. And at a certain point, it suddenly hit him that he's really not behaving appropriately towards the Rebbe. So he wrote an apology letter. He says, I've been talking to you like my mother. I share with you that you wore red shoes on a date. I mean, you don't talk to the Frierdiker Rebbe about that. Or not red shoes on a date. And he apologized for bringing the Rebbe into such nonsense. And the Rebbe wrote him a beautiful answer. And the answer basically was, no, that's my job. please keep sharing. Tell me everything. I want to know everything. Don't be embarrassed. Whatever it is that's on your mind is on my mind. So Rabbi Leitch had a similar relationship with the Frierdiker Rebbe, but his relationship was really cool. It was really cool. He was a tzaddik, so he had tzaddik treatment. He would go into the Frierdiker Rebbe and say, someone suggested I should meet this girl. He says, no, don't meet her. Not they would meet and it wouldn't work out, which is the normal procedure. Another girl, don't meet her, don't meet her. He just told him not to meet a girl. And he once complained to the Rebbe, I have to go through all these names. He didn't even meet them. And then one fine day he came up with a name, and then meet this girl. And that's the girl he married. Rabbi Leitchik was really very special. Really. Even in that time he was very special. And he had... The Rebbe Pasha didn't let him date the wrong girl. So they got married, and they moved to Los Angeles. Right? So he writes a letter to the Rebbe. He wants to come to the Rebbe for Tishrei, which would turn out to be the last Tishrei of the Frierdiker Rebbe's life. 1945, Tov Shin Yud. They moved in 1949. This is the end of September, October of 1949. So he asked the Frierdiker Rebbe, can we come? They were shluchim, can we come? And the Rebbe said yes. So they came. He bumps into our Rebbe, the Ramash, who was the son of the Frierdiker Rebbe. Now, he was the Frierdiker Rebbe's right hand, but he wasn't a Rebbe. In other words, the Rebbe fathered them and also Rebbe'd them. And the Rebbe says to him, what are you doing here? So he says to the Rebbe, I asked the Rebbe if I could come with my wife, and he said, yeah, so we're here. So the Rebbe says, if I was in charge, I wouldn't give you permission. Did you hear what I just said? Yeah. Our Rebbe, he was not yet a Rebbe, says, if I was in charge, I would not let you come. Now, of course, 5 months later, he was in charge, and he didn't let people come. It's a different generation. Rebbe was a tougher Rebbe than the Frierdiker Rebbe was. He really was. He was also kinder. There's a lot of whatever. The Rebbe is a bigger Rebbe. It's just so big. Now, is that nice or not nice? You tell a kid from Poland who doesn't have a father, doesn't have a mother, who has a young wife. She doesn't even come from a Lubavitcher family. She wasn't even a Lubavitcher from home. She was a getter from home. She had a Lubavitcher nephew who was 25 years her senior, because his father married, between the oldest and youngest was 37 years. When she was born, she had great nephews and nieces. Her father was married twice. And the Rebbe says to him, if I was in charge, I wouldn't let you come. Is that nice? It's not nice. It's so insensitive.
No, it is nice.
It's nice only if on one condition. If you know that the person who's telling that to you would treat himself the same way. Right. If you know that the person who's telling that to you is not doing it because he doesn't care about you, but because he does care about you. And there are very few people on this planet who earn that much trust. To trust another human being, to say, this person's going to send me into fire and it's love, well, yeah, it doesn't feel like, you understand? I have a friend, a friend that I know, who's a big Talmud Chacham. He's a scholar, he's a learned man. So when people come to Crown Heights, who are Talmidei Chacham and B'nai Teira, a lot of them come undercover. So they ask him to show them the neighborhood, to talk to them. So he told me many years ago that somebody came to Crown Heights from Israel, who's one of the most important Rosh Yeshiva in the yeshiva called Kerem B'Yavne. Kerem B'Yavne is, in America it would be called Modern Orthodox, in Israel it's called Mizrahi. They're very frum, and they love Israel like no other group. They're really wonderful people. And the Kerem B'Yavne schools have a very strong relationship with the Rebbe. It seems like the Rebbe has that idea. You know what Hesder is? Yeshiva and army together. The Rebbe was involved from the beginning. From the beginning, I think it was even the Rebbe's idea. In the early 1960s, late 50s, this notion of a military yeshiva, not a military school, was conceived, and the Rebbe supported it unbelievably. He was very deeply involved. Anyway, so this man visits Crown Heights, and he shows him the Rebbe's house and the Rebbe's library and the whole thing. So he tells my friend these words. He says, I want you to know, Rabbi Cook was a Rebbe. Have you heard the name Rabbi Cook? Yitzhak Isaac Halevi Cook. He passed away in 1936. He's gone 80 years. And he says he was a Rebbe. People worshipped him. I mean, he was so revered during his lifetime. He said, but shlichus, to get people to leave their home and their family and their country and their community and go live no place, he says he could not get his people to do that. They wouldn't listen to him. They just wouldn't go. Only the Rebbe. Now, why do you think Why do you think that is? Now, I'm not going to pass judgment on Rabbi Cook. The point is, people went on shlichus with the Rebbe because they knew that he's not treating them any different than he treats himself. They knew that he's with them on the shlichus. And shluchim knew that, and they experienced it, and they felt it. People went on shlichus with joy. You're going to sacrifice your whole life, you, your wife, and your children, you, your husband, and your children, for other people, and you're delighted to do it. Now, where does it come from? When you know that the person giving you the work knows that this is the right thing and it's the best thing, that's freedom. Shluchim are the most incredible human beings. They're not suffering. They're not imprisoned. They're free. And they're never freer than when they do the work of shlichus. Think about it. So my point is, and I've been talking in circles, really, is the Jewish people leave Egypt and they become free, not in not having a master, but in having a master. But the kind of master who doesn't take their will away, as the slave, a slave doesn't have his own will, it's his master's will. But the kind of master that helps actualize one will, maximize what a person could be. And that's what Yiddishkeit is. Yiddishkeit has 613 mitzvahs. I don't know if you know, but that's an awful lot of mitzvahs. Mitzvahs in the morning, mitzvahs in the afternoon, mitzvahs at night, mitzvahs Sunday, mitzvahs Monday, mitzvahs Tuesday. You're never rid of mitzvahs. You always got to do mitzvahs. A yarmulke, tzitzis, tefillin, a bracha, krishma, tefillah. We're always busy with mitzvahs. And it's a pain in the neck. But it's not a pain in the neck. It's freedom. We are bigger people because our lives are more intense. And it's a fact. Everybody understands it. But you have to choose the intensity. When the intensity is imposed upon you, it's somebody else's intensity. When the chudam is, when you volunteer for it, then it's freedom. So the Mishnah says, you should know, we're free because we're slaves of God. Okay? Now, why did I just spend 25 minutes giving this introduction? The reason is because we're about to learn a Sicha that's for the first time going to talk about mitzvahs. The Sicha you have in front of you is about Kiddush and Hachodesh. I'm going to explain it to you in a minute. It's about mitzvahs. The Jews would leave Egypt. They would come to Mount Sinai. God would descend on the mountain and He would give them the Torah. But much of the Torah, a significant portion of the Torah, some of the Torah they got before. They got a whole bunch of mitzvahs in Mitzrayim. The first mitzvah the Jewish people received in Egypt was the mitzvah of the calendar. Hachodesh lechem reish chadashim, that you have to know how to sight the new moon. And when you sight the new moon, you have to sanctify the new month. You included in this mitzvah of seeing the moon and sanctifying the moon is also the mitzvah of keeping a calendar, and also the mitzvah of knowing when to make a leap year. Knowing when to make a leap year. All of that is included. It's one mitzvah that has a bunch of details that govern the Rosh Chodesh. It governs Jewish time. Right? Jewish time, as you may or may not know, follows the moon. But it doesn't follow the moon only. It follows the moon and the sun. It's a combination. Our calendar is not a strictly lunar calendar. It's not strictly a solar calendar. It's a fusion of the two, which is why we have in this year, Tafshin Ayin Tes, 2018 to 19, we're going to have 13 months. There's 2 others this year. And that additional other is for the purposes of balancing out the solar and lunar calendars, so that Pesach should be in the spring, as it's supposed to be. It's the first mitzvah. The second mitzvah is Korban Pesach. Korban Pesach is a bunch of mitzvahs itself. And then, of course, you can't do Korban Pesach without doing a bris. So a bris is another mitzvah. We got a handful of mitzvahs when we left Egypt. More than 1 or 2. Pidyon haben, the mitzvah b'choir behema, pidyon petach hamayr. It's a bunch of tefillin, mezuzah. They're all in our Pasha's boy. We got many mitzvahs at the outset, leading up to the event of the giving of the Torah. And of course, we see this all as the point. When Hashem took us out of Egypt, we became free. Or to say it in other words, when Hashem took us out of Egypt, we became His nation. We didn't become His nation because nobody else could push us around. We became His nation because He gave us Torah mitzvahs. We're free, we're Jewish because of Judaism. There really is no such thing as a Jew without Judaism. The word Jew is a religious term. I know that 90% of the Jews in the world today call themselves secular, but Jewish is a religious term. V'harayeh, There's no such thing as a 10th generation secular Jew. It's 2 generations, 3 generations, 4 generations. And then either you become from or you're lost. Because being Jewish is a religious idea. It's a political idea. It's a national idea. It's a civic idea. It's a cultural idea. But it's a religious idea. Very, very, very much. So we're going to be discussing this freedom. What makes us Jews? That we keep mitzvahs. Keeping mitzvahs is not our enemy. Keeping mitzvahs is not our slavery. Keeping mitzvahs is not our inhibitor. Keeping mitzvahs is the power of our freedom. The first mitzvah the Jewish people got was keeping time. Was keeping a calendar. That's what this Sicha is going to be addressing. Okay? So that's why I gave you this introduction about freedom. Because I want to point out that until now, the Jews have been learning lessons. They've been learning lessons of Hashem and learning lessons of freedom. But the primary part of the story we did until today is getting away from our enemy. The freedom of the Jewish people in getting away from the enemy is going towards freedom. Going towards freedom means going towards Yiddishkeit, going towards religion, going towards Torah mitzvahs. Because that's our real freedom. It says in the Chumash, when Moshe Rabbeinu was told by God Almighty to take the Jewish people out of Egypt, he said to Hashem, what schus, what merits do the Jewish people have that justifies giving them this freedom? You know what Hashem answered him? That in 3 months hence they're going to meet at this mountain, I'll give them the Torah. In other words, they were made free in anticipation of an event which would happen subsequently. It would happen later. When they would send the Har Sinai, they would get the Torah, that would bring justice, it would make sense out of the fact that Hashem had taken us out of Egypt. And that's what the Sikh is about. Okay? So let's start the Sikh. Okay, what's going to happen is we're going to learn a little bit, we're going to actually take a break, and then we're going to do it again. That's the plan, okay? But let's start. So understand what's going on. We're learning a Sikh about mitzvahs, and specifically about the very first mitzvah. So I just gave you a 30-minute talk about the idea that freedom comes from religion. Hashem makes rules that govern our lives. We have to do this and this and this. We're not allowed to do this, that, and the other. All of that, what looks like constraint and inhibition, is really the framework for real freedom, real responsibility. So the Torah begins as we're leaving Egypt with mitzvahs. Right? You know it says in the Haggadah, I always tell this to you, that when Jews left Egypt, they had very few merits. They'd been completely enslaved physically and spiritually and psychologically, so they needed some schusim. So the Eibush gave them the mitzvah of Korban Pesach, and you can't do Korban Pesach without doing Bris Milah, so they automatically had to do Bris Milah as well. So they had what's called the 2 bloods. That's how it's defined in Psukim, the blood of the Bris and the blood of Korban Pesach. We had a Sikh on it earlier, and we learned it already. And those were the merits the Jewish people had that gave them their freedom. Korban Pesach, first mitzvah. But in anticipation of that first mitzvah, the very first pasuk of that pasha, Hashem speaks about the calendar. And again, that's about our freedom. So you know how these things work. So how do we do this? We read only the underline, okay? If you'll read the underline, you'll be with us. If you won't read the underline, you'll be lost. It's not complicated. It's really that simple, okay? Hachodesh. This is the first month of the year. It's the first month of the calendar year. Now, girls, there's a Tag Yenis in Ben Exile which says that when Hashem created the world, the first month of the year was Tishrei. Hashem says here, the first month of the year is Nisan. So it says in Yenis Ben Exile that it used to be the 7th month. But now it's the first month. But we still have Rosh Hashanah and Aleph Tishrei. So the whole idea is we have different Rosh Hashanahs. We have 2 different Rosh Hashanahs. And basically one is Rosh Hashanah for life and the other is Rosh Hashanah for miracles. One is Rosh Hashanah for nature and one is Rosh Hashanah for the supernatural. Or one is Rosh Hashanah for the world, another Rosh Hashanah for Torah mitzvahs, for religion, for Yiddishkeit. Zokt Rashi, says Rashi, Shehi mitzvah rishena shenistava b'al Yisrael. That the commandment to keep a calendar, which has 3 aspects. Number 1, to see the moon and sanctify the month. Number 2, to calculate years. And number 3, to calculate leap years, are all part of the first mitzvah that Hashem gave us. And of course the argument of the Rabbi is that if it's the first mitzvah, it can't just be the first mitzvah in the technical sense, it has to be the first mitzvah in the spiritual sense. In other words, first is most important. Who's Russian? Right? The word in Russian for first is Pierwaya, right? What does Pierwaya mean? The first. secondary, but it also means the primary, the most important. Premier, right? It's the same shadish, right? Am I right or am I wrong? Right? In English, the first is the first. In Russian, the first is the crown. The most important. That's what the word that they use. Because the first is not just technically the first, it's philosophically and mystically the first. So if the first mitzvah we have is this business of a keeping calendar, the Rebbe wants to know what about it makes it first. What makes it the most important? Turn the page. B'shaychus zum Adam Gavra. The Rebbe has this whole argument, which I'm skipping about. There's different firsts, right? To Hashem, the first mitzvah is whatever it is, bris milah. To a person, the first mitzvah is the mitzvah rishena is leida sheshem alaka. I made a mistake. I want to say that again. When it comes to a person, b'shaychus zum Adam Gavra. When it comes to a person, is mitzvah rishena, the first mitzvah is leida sheshem alaka. Know that there's a God. Why? Because they don't know that there's a God. There's no point in being told to do anything else. So from the human perspective, obviously the beginning of religion is the part of religion which has to do with our personal, direct relationship with our Creator, with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with Hashem. Okay, but however, Vider Inyan is mitzad HaTeira. For us, the first mitzvah is knowing God and so forth. But for Hashem and for Teira, what's the first mitzvah? Is the mitzvah Rishayna, the first commandment is Hachodesh Lachem. This is the first month. Valdi mitzvah, because the mitzvah of keeping the calendar and sanctifying the moon and keeping the years has in itself a content which is core and fundamental, foundational. There's something about this mitzvah that makes it the first. It's not just technically the first. Listen, you got to put the mitzvahs first. You put them in order. The first one is the calendar. No. There's something about this calendar that makes it special, it makes it distinct, it makes it unique, which is why it's the first. And of course our question is, what is it about the mitzvah of keeping a calendar, which seems like such a boring, technical, who cares mitzvah, right? Is the first mitzvah in the Torah. Look at the next paragraph. The idea is, as this has become in Yonah, when we say that the mitzvah of keeping the calendar is the first mitzvah in Torah, it's in three things. You see, Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Aleph. The first way that you see that this is the first mitzvah is the mitzvah weiß dem Eifim von der Sinas HaTorah. In the mitzvah of the keeping of the calendar, you learn about how Hashem gave us the Torah. What was the nature of He gave us the Torah? Beis. Sie bringt daraus dem Koyach HaTorah mitzvahs. This mitzvah of keeping a calendar, in addition to teaching us how Hashem gave us the Torah, it also reveals the power that the Torah has on the world around us. Number 3, in sagt sich heraus die Matara v'tachlis v'mitzvah Torah. In this mitzvah is expressed the purpose and end of all of the mitzvahs. Kedilakaman, as we're going to see later on. So if you're looking at page 60, the second column, second paragraph, I circled the word dem oifen, dem koyach, di matara v'tachlis. You see? So there's 3 points. This mitzvah of keeping a calendar teaches you the style of the way the Torah was written. It teaches you the power and the authority the Torah has, and it teaches you the point of the whole Torah. 3 things. Okay? The style, the power, and the purpose. And the Rebbe spells it out. You see, if you look on your margin, I put on Sif Beis the word Oifen, the word Sif Gimel the word Koyach, and the lower left by Sif Hey I put the word Matara. Because the Rebbe is going to divide up Yiddishkeit into 3 parts. How was Torah revealed? How much power does the Torah have? The authority of Torah? And what's the point of Torah? Okay, so let's read, okay? Sif Beis, you with me? Page 62nd column Beis. The Ebenezer Pasha Seinu Stelzich. The Ebenezer in our Pasha asks, If them was Moshe loy pirish lana b'Torah eich nikba hashana b'chadash. Yes, it's a very plain question. The first mitzvah in Torah is keeping a calendar, right? Keeping a calendar is knowing when the moon is going to be seen in the sky, sanctifying the moon, creating a calendar of years, and introducing leap years, yeah? How come all those details are not in the Chumash? Only detail. The Chumash is to see when the new moon forms. But all the rest of the stuff about the months and the years and the so on and so forth are not recorded. And he asks why. And he answers, next underline, end of the paragraph, as v'zela eis, the reason this very first mitzvah does not have the details behind it, recorded to teach us, ki samach, Hashem is relying, al kriach bas adam, on the call of Bezin, the call of the Hebrew court, b'chol der v'der, in every generation. Let's say, in other words, as from the mitzvahs Kiddush Hachodesh is done, the way this mitzvah is written teaches us a clear and a revealed proof. As Teira bepirusha nitna, the Teira comes as an oral tradition with the Teira Shebal Peh and so on. As Teira Shebal Peh, the oral Teira, was the Chachamim b'chol aderes ha'magal that our rabbis revealed is ein zach with Teira Shebeksav. It's one thing with the written Teira, with the Chumash itself. So the Rebbe says, I wish I had more time to elaborate. There's a book called Teira Shlema, which is a very special work by a great master of Teira named Menachem Kasher. It's a series of Sfarim where he compiled in the order of the Chumash Medrasha. So you have like the pasuk Bereishis, he brings you every Medrash from every source, from Gemara, from Medrash, from Zayir, from this Sfarim, on this pasuk. It's a masterful work. It was never finished. He passed it before he finished it. But he did quite a bit. And each book has Miluim. In the back has notes. Sometimes his notes are complete books. He'll have a note of a complete book. One of the examples of a note on Pashas Boy, which is a complete book, is he has the entire history of the calendar. It's masterful. And the history of the calendar is important because it also incorporates the laws, the history of Smicha. Smicha changed over time. The way you endure a rabbi, Smicha is connected to the calendar. And one of the things he brings there is that there is something about the way we keep our calendar which has no equal in any other part of Torah. You know what that is? Not only is the halachas of keeping a calendar not in the Chumash, the halachas of keeping the calendar are not even in the Gemara. Did you know that? If you want to know how to keep Shabbos, learn Masechta Shabbos. You want to know how to keep kosher, keep Masechta Chulin. You want to know how to keep the calendar, the Gemara is not going to help you. There's a tractate called Reish Hashanah, which is supposedly supposed to teach you how to keep the calendar. And you have a few Mishnahs and a little Gemara that tell these weird stories that are incomplete references to the way the calendar, the moon is sighted. But he writes, Mendel Kasher writes, that it was called Said HaIber, the secret of how to keep a calendar. That even, we all know that the oral Torah was not written down for 1,500 years, and why it wasn't written down. The calendar was not even written down when the oral Torah was written down. It's oral, Sheba oral. It's Baal Peh, Sheba Baal Peh. In other words, even when the Torah Sheba Peh was recorded, this remained a Messiah from father to son. Because it's not meant for the masses, it's meant only for the rabbis. And for the same reason, the Torah wasn't written for all those years, which is why the whole world studies our Bible, but the whole world is not putting on tefillin and keeping kosher. Could you imagine if the laws of tefillin were written in the Chumash? Every guy would be putting on, would you like to put on tefillin? Are you goyish? The reason goyim don't have mitzvahs is because by the time the Talmud was written and the mitzvahs were recorded, the goyim lost interest. They had our Bible. Everybody studies the Jewish Bible. It's one of those weird things. Everyone studies the Bible, no one keeps the mitzvahs. They had this notion of 10 commandments, which they're not even obligated to do. They try to keep Shabbos, but nobody keeps kosher, nobody keeps Taras HaMishpacha, nobody keeps any of the mitzvahs. Why? The reason is not because they don't like them, it's because the way they observe Jewish tradition, it was hidden from them. They didn't realize it. So the Mendel Kasher writes that the way a calendar is kept is hidden from Jews. It's not in the Gemara. The Rambam was the first person to actually record it, to write it down. So it's an oral tradition. So the Rebbe says, you know why the first mitzvah in Torah is to keep a calendar? Because in the mitzvah of keeping a calendar, you learn how Torah was written. If you're looking on page 60, the second paragraph at the top, it says, Dem oifim from the Torah, how the Torah was given, Dem koyach ha-Torah v'mitzvahs, the power of Torah and mitzvahs, and the matar v'tachas. There's three things. How it was given, how much power it has, and what's the point. You know how it was given? A combination of ksav and al-peh. A combination of written and oral. The Torah was not given in such a way that you don't need help. The Torah was given in such a way that you have the work and you need commentary. I had a grandfather. I had two grandfathers. They're both in the world of truth. But I had two grandfathers and I loved them both and I knew them both. My mother's father passed away way after my wedding. My youngest son is named after him. My mother's father was an American-born Jew who had the good fortune to go to yeshiva in the 20s and 30s, which was almost unheard of. And he was from, all of his brothers were from, his sisters, beautiful mishpacha, and he was an American Jew. And he would repeat, he had his ideas that he would say all the time, and he had some teachers. And one of his ideas that he would say to us as children growing up, and he would say to my parents as well, my father, The Gemara was written in such a style that you cannot learn it without a teacher. You can't learn Torah. You can open up a science book and read it. You really can. You can't open up a Gemara and learn it. It's written in such a way that you'll never get it without a teacher. It's by design. You need someone to add words to the written text to bring it to you. It's called al peh. You can't just sit down and read a Gemara. It's not going to work. It's not designed that way. It's designed to create that link. So the Rebbe says the first message of the first mitzvah, which is the keeping of the calendar, is some of this is oral, some of this is al peh. It's not all written down. You need a teacher. You need to join the chain and become the next link because you can't have it independently. So when you ask the question, why is the first mitzvah in Torah Kiddush Hachodesh of all the other mitzvahs? Because more than most mitzvahs, it represents, it brings forward the notion that the Torah has an al peh and a b'ksav. You follow? You understood what I'm saying?
You're going to explain how?
How what?
How the calendar actually
works? No.
How it shows that the Torah is given orally and by written, because that's what the Rebbe is saying, correct?
Oh, because so little of what it entails is recorded in the Chumash.
Okay, thank you.
Most of it is oral. Almost none of it's written. Only thing is written is that you should keep the calendar. See the moon? Everything else is oral. And what's unusual about this is that the oral within the oral. In other words, even where the oral Torah is recorded, this is unrecorded. And Menachem Kasher argues that the reason that's the way it is because it's called Soid Ha'ibur, the secret. Only known to the Chachamim. Just like the fact that our mitzvahs were oral for 1,500 years, the world, the Gentile world that's adopted our Bible has not adopted our mitzvahs, which is how Hashem wanted it. More specifically, even amongst Jews, this business is a secret. Only for the Sanhedrin. So it was preserved. The first person to write it down was Rambam. Really. First person. Enough. There's so many commentaries. Once Rambam wrote his work, there's tons of commentaries on Rambam. Mm-hmm. In other words, the development of the scholarship of the Jewish calendar begins with Rambam, it doesn't end with Rambam. Mm-hmm. Rambam is controversial, Rambam has his opinions, people disagree with him, and there's hundreds and hundreds of books written on astronomy as it relates to the calendar. But I would say that the foundation of it all is Rambam. Like I said, there are some Gemaras or some Midrash Chazal, but they're very obscure. I don't know whether the Rif and the Rif who was before the Rambam talks about it.
Why did he feel the need to write it down?
Rambam wrote everything.
Okay.
So
actually, why did our Rabbi tell him that he wouldn't have given him permission to come?
Why did he tell it to him?
Yeah.
He had a higher standard. The Rebbe was a tougher Rebbe than the Frierdiker Rebbe was. Much tougher.
That
he expected more from him.
I mean, those are his children he was raising in Los Angeles. I mean, he was a shliach.
Right. He didn't have any children at that time. They were.
No, I don't mean literal. I mean,
right, of course, right. The Rebbe and the Frierdiker Rebbe were very different personalities. It's, if the Rebbe had been the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Frierdiker had been the Rebbe would have done what the Frierdiker Rebbe did, and the Frierdiker Rebbe would have done what the Rebbe did. I believe tzaddikim at this level do what needs to be done. It's not just personality. But the Rebbe's brother, Label, Rebbe had a brother Label who lived in Israel and then later in England, said once to one of the Chassidim, he says, "You don't know my brother. I know him. You're going to work hard under him." Before the Frierdiker Rebbe passed away, he says, "When he has the job, you're going to work hard." And boy, did we work hard. The demands were incredible, but the fruit is also, the success, it's not normal. It's pashat amazing. It's extraordinary. It's mamish extraordinary. But the Rebbe, you couldn't get a thank you from the Rebbe. What else are you going to do? What are you going to do? No, next. He told rich people, not even from people, I give you a guarantee, I'll never be happy. I give my word, I'll never be satisfied. It's not going to happen. I'm always going to want more. It's an interesting way of living.